Now, your first protocol when you load the data into Power BI should always be into the data model because you can't do anything with multiple tables without actually building a data model. So I'll show you this practice techniques of building a good data models. First things first, to always double check the relationships that Power BI guesses. Now, Power BI seems like looks like it has guessed some relationships here. But the first thing to do here is to hover over the relationships to check that the two correct columns line up. In this case, they do because you can see that in this case they do because the product idea to align it. But sometimes that is not the case. So you have to be very aware and careful that Power BI can guess relationships wrong sometimes. Um, it can guess relationships wrong between two columns or even the different types of relationships. So just for the purpose of this example, what I'm going to do, I'm going to delete some of these relationships and then we're going to recreate them. But first, we're going to rearrange things in our data model. So after deleting them, um, there's a few different ways you could structure this data models. You could put them in different. You could put them anywhere. You could put them in different ways. You've got many flexibilities, but I like to use this technique where I like to put all my tables, uh, which I want to filter my data by. I like to put them all at the top like this, and then having my fact table below them. These tables above are called my lookup tables, and essentially they're just filter tables. They filter fact tables. So uh, fact tables are essentially data at its highest level. It's your facts table that you try to filter through. So you try to build these relationships to see where. So if you drag, say, if you want to build a relationship between the location table and the sales table, all you need to do is just drag the location ID and connect it to the location ID and the sales table. The important thing here is that the arrow needs to point from the lookup table to the fact table. What you want is a 1 to a star at the end of the table. So that signifies one-to-many relationship. As you're starting out in Power BI, 90% of your relationship will be this kind of one-to-many. But sometimes where you're happy, you could get a double arrow here. If you double click on that line, you'll see this relationship pop up, uh, and you can actually change this cross filter direction from a single to a both. So sometimes when you create a relationship, you could get this double arrow line, which shows you this cross filtering in both directions. And what I recommend here is to disregard that, and because in most cases you do not actually need this double direction filtering. What it actually does, and why you want to structure like this, because the filters usually flow from the lookup table down into the fact table. But what a double action means, it means that filters can flow from the sales table into the location. And in most cases, that is never reality. That's not how you want to think about how filters want to work in Power BI. You always want to think about dimensions over here, say like a county, state, salesperson, date, salesperson, dates, dimensions. So these most of these we're going to think of like filters that are going to filter into our source dimension. So rarely you're going to filter from your location ID on the sales to your location because there's no calculations or measures that we could do over those tables. So in most cases, it's going to be a single, and I recommend that to keep it single most of the time. But yes, Yeah, I mean, you might come across these scenarios where you need to have a double both way filter, but you'll see. So let's connect to the rest of these tables. So obviously the date table will connect to the date person, date table, the salesperson ID will connect to the ID down here, and the customize here to the customer ID, and the product ID to the product ID. Yes, so now you can see that they've all been connected. So we just and now we're kind of modeling it now, and we have all the lookup tables at the top, all uh, the one direction relationships that are flowing downhill into our fact table. And so now that we've done it, we can use any dimension or any column here to filter information that we source from this table. We could use, for instance, first name, last name, salesperson name. We could got locations, customer name. In location, we have a number of different things like state, state code, county, the name of the of the city, yeah, and so on and so forth. Uh, so those can never filter those tables unless we have built these relationships. But now that we have, we built a very efficient data model. We could use all this number of dimension models to filter this table of sales by. So maybe you're asking why even have these lookup tables? Why don't you just have this a massive lookup table? Well, there's a reason why you don't. So if you jump into this data on the section you'll see that we can actually see the data that is sitting within that table. So if we look at the sales table, you can see that this table is actually almost 11,000 rows. Now, what if we now what if this is just one table? So what if we wanted to look at information over a year or over many months of a year or over the city name and so on and so forth. So we would have to create columns of information that were 11,000 rows long, and this information would be repeated many times. So um, and by having the date table separately, so we would only have to reference it once, and we could create dimensions from that one date to filter those 10,000, 11,000 row tables. So yeah, this date table is only 1100 rows. Our location table is only 74 rows. So we only have to have our city names once in this different dimensions that are associated with it, instead of jumping into a sales table and listing it over 11,000 times. So we could create this efficiency by these relationships. So everything within this tables are still connected to that table, except now we have them in a much efficient separate tables by themselves than having to have this massive table that is 11,000 rows long, which will filter up. It's just a far more efficient way to store data than actually to and the model data and to run our calculations and to filter through those dimensions of the data. You can also manage relationships through the manage relationships pop-up. So for example, if you get rid of this relationship, so you could just click through on the home row of the manage relationships, and you click on that, and then you create a new relationship between our product table, say product ID, and then through the cells and then the product ID, and then you can see it's a one-to-many, it's a single, uh, and then you could just press OK, it's OK, and then we'll just build that relationship as it was. So there's a few ways to create these relationships, um, but so yeah, could also if you want to have a look, a quick snapshot of what the relationship looks like, you could also look it through there and edit it. And it brings you back to this pop-up where you could make the changes or review what they were. One thing to note here that you have uh, many-to-one relationship, and this can confuse people. And the reason why it's many to one is because you can see that the sales is at the top and the product at the bottom, but it's actually the same as one to many. It's just because of the tables in the order. The key thing to know is that you want the ones at the top on your lookup tables, and your stars is actually on your, yeah, and your stars on your, which is all your on your new fact tables, because that's when you're going to have many iterations of the same ID or data in this case.